semifinals and a full year during the finals as well.
All right, and with that, we are underway. Brad Nelson versus Justin Bransfield. This is your top four. Both players start off by trading off basic lands and just developing their mana. There is no Thoughtseize from Bransfield. Or, well, maybe no turn one Thoughtseize.
Yeah.
All right, so on turn two, Justin is going to lead off with Thoughtseize. We will see what Brad's holding. It is Syncopate, Last Breath, Supreme Verdict, and Sphinx's Revelation.
So this is a hand for Brad that's pretty good at defending himself against Justin's creatures. Last Breath is effective at answering Pack Rat and Night Veil Spectre. No blue mana, of course, is very risky, and if Justin finds an Underworld connection this next turn, Brad could be in a load of trouble.
Yeah, this is a pretty risky keep from Brad, especially because of how weak it is to cards like Underworld Connections and Thoughtseize.
Of course, if Justin's all on creatures, then this is a pretty strong keep from Brad.
Yeah, and as we do see, the creature in Justin's hand is Desecration Demon, actually, which has prompted him to go ahead and take the Supreme Verdict. And Brad, next play is Island.
It's obviously a big draw for Brad, as now a lot of his hand is live.
Yeah, so a turn three play from Bransfield is Night Veil Spectre. Could not meet a Last Breath more quickly, and the hand that at one point looked a little risky for Brad has become nothing but solid here. His next draw is Detention Sphere, so he has now two generic answers in his hand to permanents.
And if he draws a second blue mana shortly, he could actually fire off this Revelations fairly soon.
Yeah, so it'll be Desecration Demon from Justin Bransfield. Brad going to go ahead and Syncopate as opposed to Detention Sphering there, mostly just so that he can leave up mana to Syncopate another play once to make sure all his removal's live. And we see Justin going for Underworld Connections and the top. Brad getting him off the top deck with a second Syncopate.
Brad's drawn quite well here. Again, just a second blue is all that's really missing to make this draw excellent from a hand that was looking very sketchy at one point.
Yeah, so we see Justin getting pretty full up on lands. We see he still does have a Devour Flesh left in his hand. One of the problems with this matchup is that Mono Black does have some pretty dead cards in game one.
Yeah, he's really looking for something like Pack Rat or Underworld Connections to alleviate all of his dead draws.
Yeah, his two remaining spells right now, Pharika's Cure and Devour Flesh. We do see from Brad, though, still no lands. He's stuck on 4, and that may provide an opening. Bransfield's going to go ahead and make Desecration Demon this turn.
Brad with pretty stock full removal at this point. Still has a Detention Sphere in hand as well.
Yeah, so Brad did draw another land that turn and was forced to Supreme Verdict, but because he tapped out, he was not able to cast another counterspell as Desecration Demon was cast by Bransfield. And land number 6 means Brad now can Detention Sphere the Demon with a Dissolve up, and that puts him pretty far ahead here.
Yeah. And Brad's hand has gone from junk to now quite good. A land here, land or no, actually, he gets to Rev if he wants to. He's also picked up Elspeth for this turn.
Yeah, these pretty strong draws from here, and I do like what Brad's done. Despite the fact that he had this Elspeth, he didn't cast it this turn, opting instead to Revelation for 3.
Yeah, reasonable chance there's a hero's downfall in Justin's hand, so Brad would rather take this opportunity to fire off a Revelation.
Yeah, in this matchup, and I think you touched on that really well, Brad's threats aren't particularly safe, so really the only card he wants in game 1 is Sphinx's Revelation. You know, he wins by burying his opponent under cards, not really by sticking an Elspeth.
Yeah.
And more removal for Brad. We see it looks like now a pair of Dissolves, an Elspeth, a pair of Detention Spheres, or at least one Detention Sphere, and that should be enough here. So we see Justin playing Pack Rat with 8 lands on the table. He has 3 cards which he's more than happy to discard to Pack Rat though. 2 Devour Fleshes and Pharika's Cure.
Yeah, but Brad is chock full of answers to this with his Detention Spheres and counters. He's going to use a Dissolve here.
Yeah, and it's really, as soon as the next Revelation resolves for Brad, that will be enough. And, you know, there's that telltale play of land number 8, shocking for paying 2 for your Hallowed Fountain when it's land number 8. And that does signal the Sphinx's Revelation. Justin's going to Thoughtseize. In response, Brad will draw 5 more, moving up to 24.
Brad lays out a hand of several counter spells, an Elspeth, a Detention Sphere, a Supreme Verdict, a Jace.
Yeah,
A lot of action.
A lot of action. I think if you're Justin, you probably need to take Dissolve here with the hope that you top deck an Underworld Connections. It can't be pretty happy, but he's gonna go ahead and he also perfectly reasonable takes the Elspeth.
Yeah, Brad's been sitting on that Elspeth out of risk of Hero's downfall, but Justin knows that he doesn't have that in his hand right now, so.
Yeah. Also with the lands, Brad next turn can make a play of Elspeth with Dissolve up, which is something that Justin would have to go runner to answer. And even if he did, he'd still be pretty far behind.
Yeah. So, again, Justin just really choking on his inefficient cards here in game one. Wasn't able to land the connections, and his deck is just a little less streamlined than Brad's.
Well, there was a pretty good window for Justin in this game. You know, right after the Thoughtseize, it seemed like Justin was the favorite in this game. Brad had a couple timely draws of a blue mana source followed by a second Syncopate, and I think that window closed pretty quickly when Brad was able to use the second Syncopate to counter Underworld Connections. That was when things really started to look bad.
Counterspells, at least game one, very good against mono black.
Yeah. Counterspells are pretty much always good in this matchup. We see Jace revealing another Elspeth and a Revelation for Justin, and that will be enough. So Brad Nelson up game 1-0 over Justin Bransfield. The counterspells I was saying before, though, are always good in the matchup. They become a little less reliable in games 2 and 3 because of the large number of targeted discard that comes out of Justin's deck.
Welcome back to the booth. Patrick Sullivan, Matthias Hunt. We're in the semifinals right now of the Star City Games Standard Open here in Baltimore, and it is trivia time. So the way that this works is we're going to ask you a question, and you are going to tweet your answer at SCG Live, hashtag SCG Premium, and of the correct answers, one will be chosen at random, and that person will be the recipient of 6 free months of Star City Games Premium.
All right.
You got a question?
I do. So our question, we're going to go ahead and go back to this Saito list of blue-white that the players have been playing, including Brad Nelson and Todd Anderson this weekend. I'm wondering, what is the one black card in the sideboard of Brad's blue-white control deck?
So there's your question. What is the black card in the sideboard of Brad Nelson's Saito blue-white control list? Again, tweet your answer at SCG Live, hashtag SCG Premium, and one lucky follower out there will receive 6 free months of Star City Games Premium.
It's a pretty interesting inclusion in the deck. It's only really castable off the 6 temples that the deck plays.
Yeah, but when you're looking at so many cards through your card drawing, your Azorius Charms, and your Jaces and so forth, you can afford some pretty greedy splashes.
Yeah.
So as we go to the sideboard here, I'm going to take a look at Justin's first of all. This is a pretty straightforward mono black sideboard. 3 copies of Dark Betrayal, 4 Duress, 2 Erebos, 2 Doomblade, a Farika's Cure, and 3 Lifebane Zombies. The natural swaps here, of course, bring in the Duresses, bring in the Ereboses, cutting some of the creature removal.
Yeah, and we've seen this, a lot of players go through this. We've seen the mono black versus blue-white matchup a couple times before. Yeah, bring in the Duresses, bring in the Ereboses, even bring in the Lifebane Zombies just because they generally tend to be preferable to Desecration Demons. Bring out the cards like we saw there, like the Farika's Cures and Devour Fleshes that that really are dead in the matchup.
And over on Brad's side, you see a sideboard of Pithy Needle, 4 Archangel of Thune, 4 Soldier of the Pantheon, 3 Dark Betrayal, 3 Gainsay.
Yeah, so the Needle is really strong in the matchup, and he'll certainly bring that one in. Other than that, it's pretty much just Archangel of... He could bring an Archangel Thune. He could bring in Dark Betrayal as well. It's pretty good against most of Justin's creatures. They're all black. So yeah, we'll probably see those come in. I don't know. The question is how many Angels he'll bring in. My guess is none, because we saw that Brad actually didn't even bring in the Angels against Mono Blue yesterday.
I actually spoke to Brad.
Okay.
He said that he brought in several Angels. They just didn't come up.
None of them came up. Okay.
Which was bizarre because he saw so many cards in games 2 and 3, and we never saw an Archangel. No, I asked Brad about it. He said he brought them in and just didn't find them. Over on the other side of the bracket, Zach Jesse playing Mono Black Devotion up a game against Meru Beno playing Red Splash White Devotion.
All right, so Zach is our other Mono Black player, quickly up a game. It is possible still to see a Mono Black finals here.
So the post-board games, in your opinion, still about jockeying over Underworld Connections. The Mono Black deck just gets a little bit better at setting it up.
Yeah, I do think that Mono Black gains percentage in this matchup from sideboard. mainly just because Duress and Thoughtseize are so good against blue-white control. You know, he has, and now at post-board he has 8 cards that really are just a free take anything. You know, Duress takes every card in the deck. Thoughtseize always takes any card in the deck and costs 2 life, but 2 life is pretty insignificant in the matchup. So Justin's, you know, Brad can't count on any card really. What I always have told people in the control deck in this matchup is when you look at your opening hand, you have to keep it. You should just assume that the best card and it's gone when you make your mulliganing decision, especially post board, because it almost certainly will be.
This is this is the benefit of I think what I do like about the Saito list is the inclusion of Syncopate, not something that every blue-white list plays, and this gives it a little more game at stopping a card like Underworld Connections, like Thassa, while in the draw.
Yeah, it does give him the fact the Syncopates are good. He has more Syncopates than most players do have in the main. So he has a 3rd one. Most players play, you know, no more than 2. So that gives him a little more game. On the flip side, he has cut the negates, which are typical in the sideboard. So in the past, you would boarding, you know, up to 2 negates out of the blue-white deck, and there aren't any for him here. Instead, he's gone with Dark Betrayal to actually answer creatures.
So game 2 getting underway momentarily here between Justin and Brad.
Yeah.
Brad, our 5th overall seed in the tournament, and our 3rd ranking player in the Season 1 standings.
Yeah, both these players actually, there's the 5th and 8th seed. The other side of the bracket, we have the 2 and 3 seeds. So the finals, you know, the winner of this will be on the draw in the finals. And as we saw last game, what happens is that Mono Black really just tries to protect one card in their openers. We do see an Underworld Connections in Bransfield's opener. He's going to start on Temple of Deceit, and he's really just going to try to sculpt a game plan where he can resolve this card. As we see both Dissolve and Detention Sphere in Brad's hand, he has plenty of answers for Underworld Connections. And yeah, no Duress or Thoughtseize from Bransfield means that this Connections will either hit a Dissolve or a Detention Sphere. You see the turn 3 play from Bransfield is Lifebane Zombie. We see Brad's hand. It is Aetherling, Dark Betrayal, Dissolve, Detention Sphere,
Last Breath, I believe.
Last Breath, Plains, and one other card to the left there.
Another Last Breath, perhaps?
Very possible. Yeah, the Dark Betrayal will be cast right there on the end step to take care of Lifebane Zombie.
So Brad not able to cast his Dissolve, but a couple answers in hand to that Underworld Connections.
Yeah, he has the Needle and Detention Sphere in hand, but it does mean that Bransfield will get at least one chance to draw a card off it. And we see turn 4 there, rather than playing Connections and a card, Bransfield's going to go ahead and make Desecration Demon. That will get hit by Detention Sphere.
And all this is about trying to open the door to resolve an uncontested Connections.
And the Thoughtseize, a huge draw off Bransfield. He's going to go ahead and Thoughtseize. I have to think he's going to go take the Needle and then play land 5, play Connections, and start drawing. There is still game for Brad, though. You see Brad has Aetherling in his hand. Thoughtseize is really the only answer that Bransfield has to a card like Aetherling, and Aetherling can be a big problem for the mono black deck.
Yeah. I mean, uncontested, it can race and invalidate most of Justin's stuff.
Yeah, and on top of that, with sideboarding, Justin has, he can't even fog the Aetherling very well with Devour Fleshes and Downfalls. And I think that's the decision here that he's tanking on. It's whether or not he wants Needle or Aetherling.
The remainder of Justin's hand right now, Underworld Connections, Gray Merchant.
Yeah, and we do see he ends up going for the Needle and putting Underworld Connections on that swamp. And Brad starts searching for an answer. He cycles in Azorius Charm, finds Revelation, but does not find land 5. So suddenly that Aetherling looking like it's a long ways off. We see Justin goes to work drawing extra cards. We see one off the Connections on end step, now another one. And he finds another Thoughtseize to presumably take care of that Aetherling.
And you can see how radically different the game is once Justin gets Underworld Connections online.
Yeah, well, he's able to, suddenly it's not uncommon once they have Connections that mono black actually draws more cards than blue white. It becomes very difficult for Blue White to be in the game. And actually, because Brad missed that land, Justin is fine taking Revelation from Brad's hand and even letting him keep the Aetherling. As we see Desecration Demon number 2 on the board for Justin Bransfield.
And Brad's really far behind the 8 ball at this point. His hand's pretty poor. I mean, there is still, you know, he still has the long ball Aetherling plan in this game, but that door is closing pretty fast.
Yeah, we may even see Brad just cast Aetherling on 6 mana. You know, the whole just challenging Justin to have a removal spell. Ideally, you'd want to play it on 7, but with the game that's progressing, Brad may not have time to do that. As you see, Brad's already down to 14 life thanks to a Desecration Demon hit. Justin taps Underworld Connections, getting his 3rd card off it, plays Temple of Silence, scrying to the bottom, and now has the option between Lifebane Zombie and Grey Merchant. And it's going to be the zombie, leaving up 2. And that will meet a dissolve from Brad. I think not the ideal card to dissolve, but
I think Brad's just pretty desperate to scry in that spot.
yeah, I think he wants to scry. You know, if everything goes according to plan, he'll hit land 6 and tap out for Aetherling that turn. So, you know, hey, we may not get another relevant time to cast this dissolve. As it is, even with the scry, Brad doesn't hit land 6, and Desecration Demon continues going to work. Brad's down to 8.
Brad's obviously in a lot of trouble. He's going to have to find a Supreme Verdict or something similar just to answer the board.
Yeah,
and then that's not even talking about what happens with the Underworld Connections.
Yeah, and we see there Justin trying to do a 6-point life drain with Grey Merchant Bransfield. That gets another dissolve out of Brad's hand. But Brad's still in a tough spot. He's going to go ahead and cast a Jace. Jace will minus, finding 2 more lands and another Jace. And we will see Justin's going to go ahead and give Brad Jason land. And that will be it. Bransfield, the winner of Game 2, and we are on to the 3rd deciding game.
And Brad being on the play, so important in terms of him fighting over this Underworld Connections. Now, Dissolve is another live card that he has to fight over it. Of course, he's still playing against a ton of discard, but he has a little bit more game.
Yeah, we saw there, Justin actually with a low amount of discard gave Brad a window really to get into the game. Brad stumbled a bit on mana, unfortunately, and wasn't able to capitalize on that. I think the scariest hands to play against for Blade Control are hands where Justin has 2 or even 3 1-mana discard spells. Because at that point, you're really just playing off the top of the deck, and you're really susceptible to an Erebos or an Underworld Connections. So we said there, you know, Justin wasn't too disruptive. Instead, he kept a hand that just had threat after threat. He challenged Brad to answer them, and while Brad had the cards to answer them, he didn't have the mana to cast the cards to answer them.
On the other side of the bracket, Zach Jesse wins 2 games to 0 and awaits the winner of this 3rd game in the finals.
Yeah, so a pretty quick display there. Mono Black taking down Red-White Devotion in a match that took no more than 15 minutes.
Remember, we have quite a bit of Magic to go on today. Not only the finals of the Standard Open, we're an entire Legacy Open as well. So a lot of Magic today on Sunday.
Yeah. So talking about that, so I just want to touch, we didn't get a chance to go over to the other match, Red-White Devotion. Obviously, you're quite the skilled Red Mage. This is a difficult matchup for playing against Mono Black is difficult for the deck.
Absolutely. Your most explosive draws, you have a really good shot, but the mixture of removal spells that can break up either, you need to get a density of cheaper permanents in play, and then some sort of payoff card, Storm Breath Dragon usually, maybe Fanatic of Mogus, what have you. The problem is that the black deck has so much removal and so much discard that it can actually break up your enablers, causing your payoff cards to be less efficient, or just take your 1 payoff card. A lot of hands you only have a Storm Breath Dragon or only have a Fanatic of Mogus that rewards you for all the setup that you're doing. And Mono Black is just very good at picking apart those kind of decks with cards like Thoughtseize and Hero's Downfall.
So they leave you with a Burning Tree Emissary or something rather unimpressive.
Yes. You have an Ash Sell It.
And then they cast a Desecration Demon. Yeah.
You may have your Frostburn Weird. I will Thoughtseize your Storm Breath Dragon.
And that's really something you see with a lot of the Devotion decks is that if you want to chart, the power level of various cards, there's a pretty big gap between the good cards and the bad cards sometimes in these decks. You see it in mono blue too. It's right. They have a Thassa and a Frostburn weird. Like, well, one of these cards is one's a 1/4 that you have to pump, and the other one's a 5/5 indestructible for 3 with more abilities.
Yeah.
And yeah, pretty much all the devotion decks have some of that. I think mono black at least has a little more of a level a level field between its cards going on.
Yeah, it's less dependent on other things going on. See Brad here taking a mulligan.
All right, so right now the field is Justin Bransfield with mono black playing Brad Nelson with blue white. The winner will go on to play Zach Jesse, also playing mono black in the finals.
And the part of the, a weakness potentially in this matchup for Brad is the Saito deck plays so many counter spells. I think a card that subtly adds a lot of power for blue white against decks like mono black is a card like Divination. Just raw card count matters so much. It helps you weather the storm of all the duresses and Thoughtseizes post board. But Brad can't afford to play a 3-mana sorcery that doesn't impact the board because he's playing so many syncopates and dissolves.
Yeah, they're actually in Brad's list. He's not running divinations, which I know in previous incarnations of light you do see 3 or 4 divinations, and even then they're strong enough that you basically when you look at your hand in this matchup, you assume that any Thoughtseize address will hit your divinations. They tend to be a pretty big magnet for the card.
And Brad's going to go down to 5 here.
Yeah, and this is really difficult for Brad. You almost just don't want to mulligan to 5 against mono black ever, because of the fact that blue white's cards all do the same thing. And when you mulligan to 5, like I said, you already in this matchup have to assume that your hand is missing 1 card, right? So once you're at 5, what's your best 5-card hand? It would be something like 3 lands, Jace, Syncopate, right? That'd be a pretty good 5. Okay, say you keep that 5. Land go, and now I duress you.
Yeah.
Okay, your hand is no longer, as soon as I take the Jace, you no longer have a good hand. And that was pretty much the best 5 you can construct.
Yeah, it's, the same theory goes in Legacy when you're playing against decks with Hymn to Torak. You had to err on the side of keeping hands because raw card count, it matters so much when your hand's under attack.
Right, if I'm going to hymn you, you don't want to start with a 5-card hand. It doesn't matter what the 5 are, because now you're going to be down to 3 after the hymn.
Yeah.
The one, it's almost at the point where what Brad would like to keep is a 5-lander, and then, so he'd blank Justin's top deck duresses and Thoughtseizes, and then Brad would just hope to, top deck the answers right on curve. And we see Island from Brad, Duress from Justin, and Brad has kept a hand with some ambition. It is Plains, Elspeth, Dark Betrayal, and Syncopate.
And this is what you were talking about, This hand, because of the Syncopate, is actually a keepable hand, It potentially protects him, but now the hand's just gone to...
Well, right, you have to assume when looking at the hand that, like I said, that the best card in the hand will be taken out of it, right? And that card was Syncopate when you looked at the hand. So now it's a Dark Betrayal Elspeth 2-lander.
Although it looks like Justin does not have a 3rd land in hand, nor anything that's really castable besides these discard spells.
Yeah, he does have Thoughtseize and Duress in hand, so he can triple disrupt Brad's hand. He doesn't have a 3rd land. So his hand right now is Grey Merchant, Grey Merchant, Grey Merchant, Thoughtseize, Duress, and Night Veil Spectre. The game plan to me is pretty straightforward. That he's going to try to just push Night Veil Spectre through.
Yeah. You see him not actually fire off his discard spell here. That turn, at least.
Yeah, well, he knows he can't top deck the black source for Night Veil Spectre this turn because he's playing a Mutavault. And I think he'd want to fire off Duresses and Thoughtseizes as close to Night Veil Spectre time as possible.
Right. He also gives Brad more opportunities to draw cards that possibly matter.
Yeah, and we see now that he drew a Temple, he scryed, and now he's going to go ahead and use the Duress again. And Brad will Syncopate the Duress. That's pretty much a standard play. If you have the counterspell, you just counter the Duresses. And Justin, having scryed to the top, that's going to be Underworld Connections that he puts down on Mutavault.
Brad was actually doing an okay job of actually keeping pace in this game. Justin's hand was fairly bad, but now Justin's starting to run away.
Yeah, we see a Mutavault drawn off Underworld Connections. Justin's going to Thoughtseize again. This is Disruption spell number 3. Brad's hand has not improved significantly. It's got Revelation and Last Breath in addition to the Dark Betrayal and Elspeth. And by putting, I want to just point out, putting the connections on Mutavault is a little bit of a greedy play. Justin went ahead and did that so that if he drew a Swamp, he could play Nightveil Spectre. What that does mean is if Brad top decks that Pithing Needle, he can get double value off it by both needling Mutavault and the Underworld land that can tap for Underworld Connections.
Yeah. But he might just be so taxed on black mana because he's trying to land these Nightveil Spectres.
I mean, it's certainly Justin's game to lose here. He's going to cast Nightveil Spectre, which will betray him, or actually will get Last Breath. Will in some way not stick on the board. Yeah, and Brad's not actually in the worst spot. Because he's drawing lands, he has live top decks here. Unfortunately for him, Justin's still drawing 2 cards a turn, but. And with that, Gray Merchant of Asphodel will be the next creature for Justin. It's going to, with this trigger on, Brad's going to Dark Betrayal it, so he's only drained for 2, but it'll go 21 to 18.
And Elspeth the play for Brad, but we see multiple copies of Hero's Downfall in Justin's hand.
Yeah, well, and Brad's got to suspect this too, right? Because Justin had multiple opportunities to take the Elspeth and never took it. Mm-hmm. You ever think, well, there's probably a reason my opponent's not taking Elspeth. And yeah, Hero's Downfall, as you mentioned, cast, and Nightveil Spectre, both by Justin. We will see what Brad's answers here. He does have 3 soldier tokens. None of them can block Nightveil right now.
It looks like he's looking at 3 mana. Maybe he's drawn a Detention Sphere.
He has to decide which one it goes on. Mm-hmm. I have to think if he has Detention Sphere, it'll go on Underworld Connections. As much as he doesn't want to get hit by Nightveil. Nightveil's particularly dangerous here because Justin did play a Blue Temple at one point in the game. He will be able to actually cast the significant number of Brad's cards. Say he hits a Syncopate, that'd be pretty bad. Yeah, and a lot of respect for Brad there. He's going to go ahead and Detention Sphere the Nightveil Spectre.
He's also maybe kind of damage racing a little bit too, you know?
Well, if he can deal enough damage to Justin, then Underworld Connections stops being a thing. But Brad crashes with the Mutavault and 3 soldiers. But the dent in the life total really won't be made. Another Gray Merchant of Asphodel from Justin. A hit with Mutavault, and Justin has put Brad down to 12.
Revelation's off the top for Brad, probably the best draw in the deck at this point.
Yeah, and actually he's done what he needs to. He's chained Revelation into another Revelation with that draw. Brad has outs right now.
Yeah,
he is drawing back into it. What he has to hope doesn't happen is if Bransfield finds an Erebos, then things are really rough for Brad. And it looks like Justin hasn't. So yeah, Revelation land. Brad's got a Revelation for 5 set up. We may still have a game.
Yeah. These Gray Merchants are, of course, very threatening for Brad right now. But he is, in terms of card count, kind of keeping his head above water.
Yeah, Brad down to 13 because of Gray Merchant. Another Gray Merchant for Bransfield. This one drains for 8. Brad's down to 5. And, if the Revelation gives him a shot, he's still in a tough spot. But he's going to have 5 more cards in just a second. We see from Bransfield. First, before he draws the connections, he's going to play Temple of Silence. Does not like the card on top. Puts it to the bottom. He's going to hope to draw something different.
Now, Justin knows this Revelations for 5 is looming, so is he willing to add something like Desecration Demon to his board?
My guess would be he won't. He's got a pretty good clock going. He's going to connections at some point here and see what he can find. If he hits something, well, like an Erebos, that's what will change how he plays the game. But yeah, he's got to be a little concerned about the chained Revelations from Brad.
It's a lot of life to play with and a lot of cards.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things that, say if Brad's Revelation hits a Supreme Verdict, a Detention Sphere, another Revelation, and 2 lands, Justin could lose the board here.
Also, keep in mind, this is off of mulligan to 5 for Brad.
Yeah, a mulligan to 5 was after the turn 1 duress. Brad's hand was Island, Plains, Dark Betrayal, Elspeth. And he's able to make it this far off that hand, which is pretty good. All right, and Justin's just going to go ahead and push some damage. I think he was debating whether or not he wanted to swing with the Connections to Mutavault as well. That was what the pause was for a while. So this attack is for 9 damage. I'm going to go ahead and start by Revelationing for 5. That puts him up to 10 before he decides on his blocks.
Brad wants a little bit more information. Justin, aware of the fact that he might get Supreme Verdict next turn, it's pretty reasonable, so he's just going to go ahead and send everything in. And if Brad's willing to trade, that's great. And if he chump blocks, that's great too.
Well, no more Revelations for Brad. He's picked up a lot of tools. He picked up a Dissolve, an Azorius Charm, a Last Breath, and a Jace, all from that Revelation. And now we will see. Brad's going to go ahead and take 5, go down to 5, and he's going to take out the Mutavault. Or attempt to at the very least. Justin, with Doomblade, will have none of that and gets all of Brad's creatures. And so what do you think? He left in the Doomblade. So you think Justin's suspecting an Archangel of Thune?
Yeah, he might be just hedging a little bit. That was not the greatest trade for him, but he was able to cash it in for some value at least.
Yeah, he was able to keep his Mutavault, which seems pretty important. I think he obviously worried that Brad had top-decked a Supreme Verdict off the Revelation there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so on 5 life, we will see what Brad's going to do to stabilize. He doesn't have the Verdict in hand yet. Looks like he's going to start on Jace, Architect of Thought.
And if that's the case, he's definitely tapping his mana in such a way that he's not planning on minusing this turn.
Right, because he's not leaving up Supreme Verdict. Yep, he's going to, and agreed, he's going to go ahead and plus the Jace. Justin does potentially have 5 attackers. Brad would be more than happy to see that Mutavault with Connections on an attack, because he has both Last Breath and Azorius Charm in hand.
Although Justin is representing lethal even without attacking with the Connections Mutavault.
Yeah, and Justin with the draw, that's going to start on Thoughtseize. Now he'll get the perfect information for his attack. And he sees land, Last Breath, Azorius Charm, Dissolve.
So Brad has 2 cards in his hand that protect him from a lethal attack right now.
Yeah, this is Azorius Charm and Last Breath.
He also has a Mutavault to block with as well.
Right, and I like what Justin did. Justin took the Dissolve there. He's willing to let Brad Last Breath and Charm his creatures. I think he wants the Dissolve because that card probably has if Brad top decks the Supreme Verdict next turn, then Dissolve has the biggest impact, I would say, of any of the cards here.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for Brad, he was able to plus the Jace to survive this turn, but Justin, with another copy of Hero's Downfall at the ready, means that the Jace will likely never get to draw 2 cards for Brad. And I think this is one of the things in the matchup which is scary from the blue-white side in this against mono-black, is that I think this is pretty much the only matchup for blue-white where I feel like you can Revelation for 5 into another Revelation and still lose the game.
Yeah, they can actually match you card for card.
Right.
They can break up the more critical pieces of your Revelations with the discard spells.
Well, we even saw Brad, right? He Revelation for 3 into a Revelation for 5. So that's drawing 8 extra cards. And the Revelation for 5 by no means bricked. It found, a counter spell, 2 removal spells, and a draw spell. That's great. And we still found, that didn't really help Brad any. He was still losing. He was losing before the Rev for 5 and losing after it.
No, with that said, he's Rev for 3 and for 5, and he's probably been outdrawn this game as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that that's all he's done is Rev for 3 and 5. Yeah. Mono Black can compete with your late game if they have enough Ereboses and Connections going. And there we see Jace has meta Hero's Downfall. The Gray Merchants go ahead and swing in at Brad. And Brad goes to 4. Azorius Charm will draw a card. And we see a Pithing Needle drawn for Brad that can turn off Underworld Connections, but the damage has been done. He's going to need a Supreme Verdict here. I don't think he has it. Yeah, he can, to survive, he can last breath his own Mutavault and then play Pithing Needle on Mutavault. He'd have to do it in that order because Needle's Mutavault, he can't activate his own. And then you would just have to hope to draw that Supreme Verdict on the very next turn.
Some pretty long odds.
Yeah, I mean, and even if that all that happens, then Brad's at 1. So yeah, you're right. The odds are still not great.
When he picked up that needle there for a second, you know, if his next draw step is a Supreme Verdict right there, he would be right back in it.
Yeah, no, he's not going to Needle Mutavault here. And we see duress from Bransfield, and that'll be it. Justin Bransfield defeats Brad Nelson, winning both sideboarded games 2-1, and we will have an all-black finals.
Yeah, and Brad fought gamely there in that third game on his mulligan to 5. Drew